Captain Jake Morrison stared at the readings on his screen for the third time. The numbers didn't make sense. His ship Earth's Pride had been on a routine patrol mission near the edge of human space when the sensors picked up something impossible. Lisa, come take look at this, Jake called to his science officer, Lieutenant Commander. Lisa Rodriguez walked over to his station, her dark hair tied back in a neat ponytail. She had been studying star charts in the navigation area when Jake's voice interrupted her work. What am I looking at, Captain? She asked, leaning over his shoulder to see the display. Energy readings, but look at the size of whatever is generating them. Lisa's eyes went wide. The object on their sensors was huge, bigger than any ship in the human fleet, bigger than anything they had ever seen before. Could it be a space station? She wondered aloud. Out here we're 3 days from the nearest human colony. There's nothing but empty space in this sector. Jake turned to his communications. Officer Tony, run a full scan. I want to know everything about that object. Ensign Tony Martinez nodded and began working at his console. His fingers moved quickly over the controls as he directed the ship's powerful sensors toward the mysterious object. Minutes passed in silence. The bridge crew watched their screens, waiting for answers. Finally, Tony looked up with a confused expression. Captain, I'm reading massive structural damage. Whatever that thing is, it's falling apart. Life support systems are failing. Answer, I'm detecting life signs. Lots of them. Jake felt his stomach tighten. A damaged ship with people on board meant only one thing. They needed help. And they needed it fast. How many life signed? He asked. Tony checked his readings again. Over 50,000, sir, but the signals are weak, very weak. Lisa grabbed Jake's arm. Captain, we have to do something. If their life support is failing, I know. Jake turned to his pilot. Rick, set course for that object. Full speed. Lieutenant Rick Davis engaged the engines, and Earth's Pride shot forward through space. As they got closer, the object began to take shape. On their main viewing screen, it was indeed a ship, but like nothing they had ever seen before. The vessel was long and twisted, almost organic in appearance. Parts of its hull were missing, exposing the interior to the vacuum of space. Bright lights flickered weakly along its surface, and streams of gas vented from multiple breaches. My God, Lisa whispered, how is anyone still alive in there? Jake studied the alien ship. It was clearly built by species they had never encountered before. The design was completely foreign, yet there was something about it that seemed desperate, like it had been patched and repatched countless times by people who refused to give up. Tony tried to make contact, use all frequencies. The communications officer worked at his station for several minutes. Static filled the bridge speakers. Then suddenly a voice came through. It was weak and distorted, speaking in a language none of them recognized. I'm getting something, Captain. It sounds like they're trying to respond, but I can't understand what they're saying. Lisa moved to her own station and began running the alien words through the ship's translation programs. Give me a few minutes. The computer is trying to find patterns in their language. While Lisa worked, Jake examined the alien ship more closely. He could see movement through some of the transparent sections, figures moving slowly as if they were very sick or very tired. Some areas of the ship were completely dark, suggesting entire Sections had lost power. Captain Rick called from the pilot station, I'm reading multiple hull breaches. That ship won't last much longer. How long do you think they have? Rick studied his instruments. Based on the rate of atmosphere loss, maybe 6 hours, maybe less. Lisa suddenly looked up from her console. I think I have something the computer has identified. Some basic concepts in their language. They're calling themselves Cathani, and Captain, they're asking for help. Jake nodded grimly. Tony, open a channel. Lisa, help me translate. The communication link crackled to life. Jake spoke slowly and clearly. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Earth's Pride. We have received your distress signal. We want to help you. There was a long pause. Then the alien voice came back, weaker than before. Lisa listened carefully and worked with the translation program. They're saying they're grateful, but they're warning us to stay away. They say they're cursed, that bad things happen to anyone who helps them. Jake frowned. Cursed? What does that mean? Lisa continued listening to the transmission. They're saying they've been traveling for a long time, looking for a place to land, but everywhere they go, people send them away. They say they don't want to bring their bad luck to us. The captain looked around his bridge. His crew was watching him, waiting for orders. These were good people, and he trusted their judgment. But the decision was his to make. Tony asked them about their condition. How many sick, how many injured? After a brief exchange, Lisa translated the response. Most of their people are sick. They have some kind of disease that their medicine can't cure. Their children are the worst affected. Many have already died. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. An entire species slowly dying in the cold of space, rejected by everyone they met. It was almost too terrible to believe. Sir, Rick interrupted. I'm detecting another whole breach, a big one. They're losing atmosphere fast now. Jake made his decision. Tony, tell them we're going to help. Tell them we don't believe in curses, only in doing what's right. Lisa translated his words. The response came back quickly, filled with emotion that needed no translation. They're crying. Captain, they can't believe someone is willing to help them. Rick, move us into position for emergency docking. Tony, contact Admiral Hayes immediately. Tell her we have a humanitarian crisis and need immediate support. As Earth's Pride moved closer to the alien vessel, Jake could see more details through the viewing ports. The Cathani looked similar to humans in some ways, but their skin had a pale blue tint and their eyes were larger. Many of them appeared thin and weak, pressing their faces against the transparent walls to look at the human ship. Children were among them, small figures held in the arms of adults who looked exhausted and desperate. Jake had seen many things in his years in space, but the sight of those alien children, sick and dying, while their parents watched helplessly, hit him harder than anything he had ever experienced. Captain, Tony reported. Admiral Hayes is responding. She wants to know the full situation. Jake picked up the communication device. Admiral, this is Morrison. We have encountered an alien species in distress. Their ship is failing and they have over 50,000 people on board, many of them children. They need immediate medical assistance and evacuation. Admiral Patricia Hayes was known throughout the fleet as a tough but fair commander. Her voice came back clear and strong. What do we know about These aliens, Captain, they call themselves Kithani, they claim to have been exiled from multiple worlds. They're suffering from some kind of disease and malnutrition, Admiral. They're dying. There was a pause. Jake knew the Admiral was considering the political implications. Humanity had worked hard to build relationships with other galactic civilizations. Taking in unknown aliens could complicate those relationships. Captain Morrison, the Admiral finally said, "You are authorized to provide immediate humanitarian aid. I'm dispatching medical ships and supply vessels to your location. We'll sort out the politics later." Jake smiled. He had served under Admiral Hayes for 5 years, and she had never let him down. Understood, Admiral. We'll begin emergency evacuation procedures. As the rescue operation began, Jake watched the Kithani faces through the viewing ports. Hope was replacing despair in their large eyes. For the first time in who knew how long, someone had said yes instead of no. He didn't know it yet, but his decision to help these desperate strangers would change the course of galactic history. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness have the biggest consequences. Ambassador Lucas Grant stood in the waiting chamber outside the main council hall on Nexus Prime. His hands were sweaty and his heart was beating fast. In all his years representing Earth to the galactic community, he had never been summoned to an emergency session like this. The message had come just 2 days after Captain Morrison rescued the Kithani. News traveled fast in space, and apparently every major civilization in the galaxy had heard about humanity's decision to help the aliens that everyone else had rejected. The chamber doors opened with a loud hiss. A tall, insect-like creature with 4 arms gestured for Lucas to enter. This was one of the Zahirian attendants, part of the hive mind species that helped run the Council's daily operations. Lucas walked into the main hall and immediately felt small. The room was enormous, with seats arranged in a circle that rose up toward a domed ceiling. Representatives from dozens of alien civilizations filled the seats, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. At the center of the circle sat Council President Thexa, an ancient being that looked like a cross between a tree and a piece of living crystal. No one knew exactly how old Thexa was, but rumors said the president had been alive when the first galactic government was formed thousands of years ago. Ambassador Grant. Zara's voice echoed through the chamber without the president moving what might have been a mouth. You will explain your species' recent actions. Lucas cleared his throat. Honored President, if you're referring to the rescue of the Kithani refugees, I can assure the Council that humanity acted purely on humanitarian grounds. A loud buzzing filled the chamber. This came from the Zapirian delegation, 12 insect-like beings whose minds were connected to each other. When they were upset, they made sounds that could hurt human ears. High Marshal Zonthak of the Valkyrie Consortium stood up. Valkyrie looked similar to humans, but were taller and had silver skin that seemed to shine under the chamber's lights. Zonthak was wearing the elaborate uniform of his species, military, covered in medals and decorations. Humanitarian grounds. Zontak's voice was cold and angry. Ambassador, your species has violated every principle of galactic safety. The Kithani are dangerous. They bring disaster wherever they go. Lucas had expected this response. During his flight to Nexus Prime, he had studied every available record about the Cathani. What he had found was disturbing, but not in the way the council claimed. High Marshal, I have reviewed the historical records. Yes, there have been incidents on worlds where the Cathani lived, but I found no evidence that they caused these incidents. No evidence. Another voice joined the argument. This came from Speaker Villara of the Chardek Collective. The Chardek were beings made of living crystal, and when they spoke, their voices sounded like wind chimes. We have documented proof of disasters following Cathani presence for over 300 years. Ballura activated a holographic projector. Images filled the air above the council floor. Lucas saw scenes of destruction, cities in ruins, planets covered in disease, entire civilizations collapsing. Behold, Belthara continued. The world of Kepler 7, the Cathani, arrived seeking refuge. Within 2 years, a plague killed half the population. The mining world of Asteroid Base 12 welcomed Cathani workers. 6 months later, the entire facility was destroyed. In an explosion, more images appeared. Wars, natural disasters, economic collapses. Each time, according to the Shard records, the Cathani had been present shortly before the catastrophe. High Marshal Xanthak spoke again. The pattern is clear, Ambassador. Wherever the Cathani go, death follows. This is why the Galactic Council declared them persona non grata 15 years ago. They are not allowed to settle on any council world. Lucas studied the images carefully. Something about them bothered him, but he couldn't quite figure out what it was. High Marshal, these records show correlation, not causation. Just because disasters happened after the Cathani arrived doesn't mean they caused them. The buzzing from the Zephyrian delegation grew louder. One of their queens, her insect head crowned with jeweled ornaments, spoke in the harmonic voice that all Zaffiran royalty used. Human Ambassador, you speak of things you do not understand. We have racial memories stretching back millennia. Our ancestors knew the Cathani in the ancient times. They were called the Cursed Ones, the harbingers of sorrow. Wherever they walked, suffering followed. President Thazira raised what might have been a hand, and the chamber fell silent. Ambassador Grant, the concerns of the council members are not without foundation. The Cathani have been associated with catastrophic events throughout recorded galactic history. Your species has acted without consulting this body, and now you have potentially exposed your worlds to whatever force causes these disasters. Lucas felt sweat running down his back. He had hoped for a more reasonable response from the council, but it was clear that their minds were already made up. President Thexer, humanity requests time to study this situation more carefully. We believe there may be explanations for these events that don't involve supernatural curses. Supernatural? High Marshal Zonthak laughed, but the sound held no humor. Ambassador, we are not primitives who believe in magic. We are advanced civilizations with sophisticated science, but sometimes science reveals truths that are difficult to accept. High Marshal activated his own holographic display. This time Lucas saw detailed scientific readouts and statistical analyses. Our scientists have calculated the probability of so many disasters occurring randomly around Cathani settlements. The odds are approximately 14 million to 1 against it being coincidence. Lucas studied the Numbers, they were impressive, but something still felt wrong about the whole situation. President Zira spoke. Again, Ambassador Grant, the Galactic Council has reached a decision. Your species has 30 standard days to remove the Cathani from human space. If you fail to comply, humanity will face complete isolation from the galactic community. The words hit Lucas like a physical blow. Isolation meant no trade, no scientific exchange, no diplomatic relations. Humanity's expansion into space depended on cooperation with other civilizations. President Zara, surely the Council can reconsider. These people are refugees, they're dying. How can we turn our backs on beings in need? Speaker Veeler's crystal form seemed to shimmer with anger. How can you risk the lives of billions for the sake of a few thousand cursed beings? Ambassador, your species' reputation for emotional decision-making is well known, but this goes beyond poor judgment. This is dangerous stupidity. The Zephyrian Queen buzzed in agreement. The human tendency toward irrational compassion has been noted in our psychological profiles of your species, but compassion without wisdom leads to destruction. Lucas felt anger rising in his chest. These beings were talking about compassion like it was a character flaw. Council members, humanity has studied the Cathani for only a short time, but our preliminary findings suggest they are not dangerous. They are simply refugees who have suffered greatly. High Marshal Zonthek shook his head. Preliminary findings. Ambassador, we have centuries of data. Your species has had these beings in your space for days. You cannot possibly understand the threat they represent. President Zara's ancient voice filled the chamber one final time. The decision is final. Ambassador Grant, 30 days. Remove the Cathani or face the consequences. This session is concluded. The chamber began to empty as alien delegates filed out through various exits. Lucas stood alone on the council floor watching them go. Their body language made it clear that they considered the matter settled. As he walked back toward his ship, Lucas activated his communication device. Priority message to Earth. He said, President Wheeler, we have a problem. During the long flight back to human space, Lucas reviewed everything he had seen and heard. The Council's evidence was impressive, but their reaction seemed extreme. Why were they so afraid of a few thousand dying refugees? More importantly, why were they so determined to make humanity abandon people who desperately needed help? Something was wrong with this whole situation. Lucas couldn't prove it yet, but he was beginning to suspect that the real reason the Cathani had been exiled had nothing to do with curses or bad luck. The truth, he suspected, was much more complicated and much more dangerous too. The powerful civilizations that ran the galaxy. President Martin Wheeler sat at the head of the long table in the Earth government's emergency meeting room. Around him sat the most important leaders of humanity's space colonies. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of air recycling systems. Ladies and gentlemen, President Wheeler began, we have a decision to make that will affect the future of our species. Ambassador Grant has delivered the Galactic Council's ultimatum. We have 26 days left to decide. Secretary of Defense Karen Russell spoke first. She was a thin woman with gray hair who had served in the military for 30 years before taking her current position. Mr. President, the choice is obvious. We cannot risk isolation from the galactic community. For the sake of 50,000 aliens, our colonies depend on trade with other species. Our technology comes from scientific exchanges. Without galactic cooperation, humanity's expansion into space will stop. Several heads around the table nodded in agreement. The logic was clear and simple. Dr. Nathan Cole raised his hand. As head of the Xenological Research Institute, he had been studying the Kethan since their rescue. He was a short man with thick glasses who spoke quietly but always had important things to say. Mr. President, I disagree with Secretary Russell. My team has been working with the Kethani for the past week. What we've discovered suggests that the Galactic Council's fears are based on misunderstanding. Explain, President Wheeler said. Dr. Cole activated a holographic display. Above the table, images of Kethani appeared, showing their blue-tinted skin and large eyes. First, the so-called wasting disease. It's not a disease at all. The Kethani have been slowly starving. Their digestive systems are different from ours, and they haven't been able to process the limited food they could synthesize on their ship. We've already developed nutritional supplements that are helping them recover. The images changed to show Kethani children who looked healthier than they had during the rescue. Second, we've been analyzing the historical records the Council presented. The pattern of disasters following Kethan settlements is real, but the timing is wrong. Secretary Russell frowned. What do you mean wrong? The disasters didn't happen after the Kethani arrived. They happened before. In every case we've studied, the Kethani came to worlds that were already in trouble. They were trying to help, not cause problems. President Wheeler leaned forward. Are you saying the Galactic Council lied to us? I'm saying they may have interpreted the data incorrectly, or Dr. Cole paused. They may have had reasons to want the Kethani gone that have nothing to do with curses. Before anyone could respond, an aide entered the room and whispered something to the president. Wheeler's face grew serious. We have an urgent report from Admiral Hayes. There's been an incident. Admiral Patricia Hayes appeared on the main screen via video link from her flagship. Her uniform was wrinkled and she looked tired. Mr. President, 3 of our outer colonies have reported attacks by unknown raiders. The attackers used hit-and-run tactics and disappeared before our patrol ships could respond. No one was killed, but several supply depots were destroyed. Do we know who's responsible? Secretary Russell asked. The attack ships use technology we don't recognize, but intelligence suggests they may be operating with Galactic Council approval. This could be their way of pressuring us to abandon the Kethani. President Wheeler rubbed his temples. The situation was getting more complicated by the hour. Admiral, what's the status of the Kethani integration? Admiral Hayes smiled for the first time during the call. That's actually good news, sir. The settlements we've established are working better than expected. She activated her own display, showing images from various human colonies on New Colorado, a mining world. The Kethani detected an earthquake that our sensors missed. Their warning gave us time to evacuate the main settlement. We saved 8,000 lives. The images showed humans and Kethani working together to repair earthquake damage on Green Valley, our agricultural planet. Kethan antibodists have helped our farmers increase crop production by 40% while using half the water. They understand plant biology in ways we never considered. More images appeared showing vast green fields and humans learning new farming techniques from their alien neighbors on frontier station. A Cathani engineer named Telvik solved a power distribution problem that our technicians had been working on for months. Their understanding of energy flow is remarkable. Dr. Cole nodded enthusiastically. Admiral Hayes is right, Mr. President. The Cathani aren't bringing us bad luck. They're bringing us knowledge and abilities we never knew existed. Secretary Russell looked unconvinced. That's all very impressive. But what about the bigger picture? Even if the Cathani are helpful, can we afford to lose all contact with the rest of the galaxy? Director Peter Walsh, who ran Earth's agricultural program, spoke up. Karen, I've seen the reports from Green Valley. The techniques the Cathani are teaching us could revolutionize farming throughout human space. We're talking about ending food shortages on dozens of worlds, and I've studied their engineering approaches, added Dr. Cole. Their technology is different from ours, but in some ways it's more advanced. We could learn things that would take us centuries to discover on our own. President Wheeler stood up and walked to the large window that showed Earth. Below, the planet looked peaceful from space, but he knew that billions of people were counting on him to make the right decision. Admiral Hayes, what's your personal assessment of the situation? The Admiral didn't hesitate. Mr. President, I've been in space for 25 years. I've seen a lot of different species, and I've learned to judge people by their actions, not their reputation. The Cathani are good people who have suffered greatly. They're grateful for our help, and they're working hard to contribute to our communities. She paused, then continued with conviction. More importantly, sir, they're people in need. If we abandon them now because other species threaten us, what does that say about who we are as human beings? Secretary Russell shook her head. Patricia, I respect your opinion, but we have to be practical. Humanity has responsibilities to our own people first. Karen, President Wheeler said quietly, what good is ensuring humanity's survival if we lose our humanity in the process? The room fell silent. Everyone understood the weight of the decision they were facing. Dr. Cole spoke again. Mr. President, there's something else. My team has been working closely with Cathani scientists, particularly their chief healer, Tilmara. She's mentioned several times that her people have abilities that go beyond what we've seen so far. What kind of abilities? She won't give details, but she's hinted that they can sense things that other species cannot. Patterns in natural events, social changes, even what doctor, even deception. She says her people can often tell when someone is lying or hiding the truth. Secretary Russell raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting they have psychic powers? I'm suggesting they may have evolved senses that we don't understand yet. Think about it. If the Cathani could detect problems before they happened, that would explain why they kept arriving at worlds just before disaster struck. They weren't causing the problems, they were trying to help solve them. President Wheeler returned to his seat. And if that's true, then the Galactic Council's version of events is completely wrong, or completely dishonest, Dr. Cole added quietly. Admiral Hayes leaned forward on the screen. Mr. President, I've been Thinking about those raider attacks. The timing is suspicious. They started right after we took in the Cathani. Someone wants us to feel pressure. You think the council is trying to force our hand? I think someone doesn't want us to learn what the Cathani might tell us about galactic history. President Wheeler looked around the table at his advisors. These were smart, experienced people who had helped guide humanity through many challenges, but this decision was bigger than anything they had faced before. I want to hear from our colony governors, he said finally, the people who are actually living with the Cathani day by day. Their opinions matter most. Over the next hour they received reports from 12 different human worlds. The message was consistent. Integration was working. Humans and Cathani were learning from each other, and both species were benefiting. Governor Lisa Chen from New was especially enthusiastic. Mr. President, the Cathani saved thousands of our people. They're not cursed, they're a blessing. When they calls ended, President Wheeler stood up. Again, I've made my decision. We will not abandon the Cathani. Whatever the consequences, humanity will stand by people who need our help. Secretary Russell shook her head. Martin, I hope you're right. Because if you're wrong, you may have just ended humanity's place in the galaxy. President Wheeler smiled grimly. Karen, if being part of the galaxy means abandoning people in need, then maybe it's time to find a new way to exist among the stars. Intelligence Officer Rachel Adams worked late into the night in her small office, deep inside Earth's military intelligence building. Coffee cups and data tablets covered her desk as she studied classified documents that had taken weeks to obtain through secret channels. Rachel was good at finding hidden information. For 15 years she had tracked down secrets that other people wanted to keep buried, but this investigation was different. The more she learned about the Cathani and their history with the Galactic Council, the more disturbed she became. Her computer beeped softly, indicating that another encrypted file had finished downloading from a contact inside the Valkyrie Consortium. Rachel opened the file and began reading. Her eyes grew wide as she understood what she was looking at. Internal Valkyrie government documents from 20 years ago. Communications between high-ranking officials discussing something they called the prediction problem. Rachel read the translated text carefully. The documents talked about Cathani refugees who had arrived on a Valkyrie colony world called Nexar 3. The Cathani had requested a meeting with colonial officials to discuss concerns about upcoming economic difficulties. The Valkyrie governor had dismissed their warnings as superstition. 6 months later, exactly as the Cathani had predicted, Nexar 3's economy collapsed due to corruption in the colonial administration. Thousands of Valkyrie citizens lost their jobs and savings, but that wasn't the most shocking part. The documents showed that Valkyrie officials had known about the corruption for years and had been covering it up. When the scandal finally broke, they blamed the economic collapse on the Cathani presence and exiled them from the planet. Rachel leaned back in her chair, her heart racing. This changed everything. She activated her secure communication system and sent a priority message to Dr. Nathan Cole. Doctor, I need to meet with you immediately. I have information about the Cathani that you need to see. 2 hours later, Dr. Cole sat in Rachel's office reading through the classified documents. His face grew pale as he understood their implications. Rachel, are you sure these documents are genuine? I verified them through 3 separate sources. Dr. The Cathani weren't causing disasters, they were trying to prevent them. Dr. Cole removed his glasses and cleaned them nervously. This fits with what I've been learning from my conversations with Elder Vexar and Chief Healer Telmara. What have they told you? They've been reluctant to discuss their abilities in detail, but Telmara finally opened up to me yesterday. She says her people have what she calls flow sense. They can perceive patterns in natural and social systems that other species cannot detect. Rachel nodded, like predicting earthquakes, economic collapses, political upheavals. Exactly, but here's the important part. They don't just predict these events, they try to warn people so the problems can be prevented or minimized. Dr. Cole activated his tablet and showed Rachel a video recording of his conversation with Telmara. The Cathani healer appeared on the screen, her large eyes sad as she spoke in her soft musical voice. We have always tried to help, Telmara was saying in the recording. When we sense that suffering is coming, we attempt to warn those who might be affected, but most species do not welcome such warnings. Dr. Cole paused the video. Rachel, she told me that every time the Cathani tried to warn a civilization about impending problems, they were accused of causing those problems instead because the people in power didn't want their corruption exposed. Exactly, it's easier to blame the messengers than to fix the underlying issues. Rachel showed Dr. Cole more documents. I found similar patterns with the Chardek and the Zaporans. In every case, the Cathani arrived as refugees, detected serious problems, tried to warn the local authorities, and were exiled when those problems became public. Dr. Cole stood up and began pacing around the small office. So the Galactic Council hasn't been protecting the galaxy from accursed species. They've been protecting corrupt governments from a species that could expose their lies. It's worse than that, Rachel said grimly. I think the council members are actively hiding disasters from their own people. The Valkyrie documents mention something called a systemic economic failure that they expect to happen within the next few years, but instead of preparing for it or warning their citizens, they're covering it up. Dr. Cole stopped pacing. Rachel, we need to talk to Elder Vexar immediately. If the Cathani can sense these upcoming disasters, they might be able to help us understand what's really happening in the galaxy. The next morning, Dr. Nicole and Rachel traveled to the Cathani settlement on Luna Base. The refugee camp had been transformed in just a few weeks. Instead of the dying, desperate people they had rescued, they now saw families working together to build new homes and gardens. Cathani children played games with human children, their laughter echoing through the dome-covered settlement. Adults from both species worked side by side on construction projects and farming experiments. Elder Vexar met them in the settlement's community center. The elderly Cathani leader moved slowly, but his large eyes were alert and intelligent. He wore simple robes that reminded Rachel of clothing worn by Earth's ancient philosophers. Dr. Cole, Officer Adams, I understand you have questions about my people's abilities. Dr. Cole nodded. Elder, we've discovered that the Galactic Council may have been lying about why your people were exiled. We think they were afraid of what you might reveal about their governments. Bixar sighed deeply. You have learned the truth that we have carried as a burden for generations. Yes, Dr. Cole. Your suspicions are correct. The Elder activated a holographic display that showed a complex web of interconnected lines and patterns. This is how we perceive the flow of events in the galaxy, social systems, economic networks, political structures. They all create patterns that most species cannot see, but we can. Rachel studied the display. What are you seeing now, Elder? Many things. The Valkyrie Consortium's economy will collapse completely within 18 months. The corruption has spread too deep to be corrected. The Shard are facing a plague that will affect their crystal network structure. They know about it but are hiding the information from smaller Shard communities. Vexar manipulated the display and new patterns appeared. The Zapian hive queens are losing control of their worker castes. A rebellion is building that will tear apart their entire social system, and the Galactic Council leadership knows all of this is coming. Dr. Cole felt a chill run down his spine. They're going to let their own people suffer rather than admit they were wrong about your species. Worse than that, Vexar said sadly, they are actively preventing solutions. Every time we tried to help, we were silenced or exiled. How many lives could have been saved if people had listened to our warnings? Rachel leaned forward. Elder, what do you see when you look at humanity's future? Vexar smiled for the first time since the conversation began. That is why we have hope for the first time in generations, Officer Adams. When we look at humanity's patterns, we see something remarkable. What do you see? We see a species that chooses compassion over convenience, a people who will stand up to powerful bullies to protect the weak. Humanity's pattern is not one of corruption and deceit like the major galactic powers. It is a pattern of growth, learning, and genuine cooperation. Dr. Cole stood up excitedly. Elder, would you be willing to share this information with President Wheeler if we can prove that the Council has been deliberately hiding disasters from their own people? We could change everything. Rachel finished. We could offer the Cathanis abilities to the smaller civilizations that are being oppressed by the major powers. Vexar nodded slowly. My people have waited for generations to find someone who would listen to our warnings instead of blaming us for delivering them. If humanity is willing to stand with us against the lies of the powerful, then yes, we will share everything we know. As they prepared to leave Luna Base, Rachel felt a mixture of excitement and fear. They had uncovered a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of galactic government, but they also had a chance to change the course of galactic history. Doctor, she said as their shuttle headed back to Earth, do you think President Wheeler will believe all this? Dr. Cole looked out at the stars through the shuttle's viewport. Rachel, President Wheeler chose to help desperate refugees even when the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy threatened us. I think you'll understand exactly what we need to do. And what's that? We're going to expose the truth, all of it, and we're going to offer the smaller civilizations something that major powers never would: honest warnings about the disasters that are coming and real help in preparing for them. Rachel smiled grimly. The Galactic Council isn't going to like No, Dr. Cole agreed, they're not. But I have a feeling that a lot of other species are going to be very interested in hearing what the Cathani have to say. 6 months after President Wheeler's decision to protect the Cathani, the galaxy was in chaos. Everything Elder Vexar had predicted was coming true, and the major civilizations were struggling to maintain control. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, now called the New Hope, watching rescue operations on the planet below. The Valkyrie colony of Nexus 7 was in complete economic collapse, just as the Cathani had foreseen, but this time, instead of suffering alone, the colonist had received advanced warning. Captain, his communications officer reported, "We have confirmation from the surface. The evacuation of the financial district is complete, no casualties." Jake nodded with satisfaction. 3 weeks ago, Elder Vexar had sensed the approaching economic disaster. Unlike previous warnings that had been ignored or suppressed, this time people had listened. The human Cathani joint fleet had arrived with supplies and evacuation ships before the crisis hit. Any word from the other rescue operations? Jake asked. Commander Phillips reports success at the Charard Crystal Farms. Dr. Barnes and Telmara managed to distribute the plague treatment to 12,000 shard before the infection spread, and Admiral Hayes confirms that the Zaffiran worker uprising was resolved peacefully after Queen Melthera agreed to the reforms the workers requested. Jake smiled. It had taken months of careful work, but humanity and their Cathani partners had proven their point. The disasters weren't caused by curses or bad luck. They were preventable problems that could be solved if people worked together instead of hiding the truth. The bridge doors opened and Ambassador Lucas Grant entered. He looked tired but pleased. "Captain, I have news from the Galactic Council session." "Good news or bad news?" "Both. The bad news is that High Marshal Xanthak is still demanding sanctions against humanity. He claims our rescue operations are interfering with internal galactic affairs." Jake shook his head. "And the good news, 17 minor civilizations have formally requested to join our alliance of free worlds. They want protection from Council policies and access to Cathani predictive abilities." This was exactly what President Wheeler had hoped for. Instead of bowing to Council pressure, humanity had gone on the offensive. They had offered the Cathanis help to any civilization that wanted honest warnings about potential problems. The response had been overwhelming. Smaller species that had been bullied by the major powers for centuries were eager to join an alliance based on cooperation instead of domination. Dr. Susan Barnes appeared on the main screen via communication link. She was currently on the Charard home world, working with Telmara to treat the crystal plague that the Charard leadership had tried to hide. "Captain, I have an update on our medical breakthrough. The treatment we developed isn't just curing the shard plague. It's actually making their crystal network stronger and more efficient." "That's wonderful news, Doctor, but there's more." "Working so closely with Telmara and other Cathani healers has enhanced my own diagnostic abilities. I'm starting to sense patterns in biological systems that I never noticed before. It seems humans can learn to develop similar abilities when we work closely with the Cathani." This was another unexpected benefit of the alliance. Human scientists, engineers, and doctors who worked alongside. Kithani partners were developing new skills and insights. The partnership was making both species stronger. Jake's thoughts were interrupted by an urgent communication from Earth. Captain Morrison, this is President Wheeler. Please report to the secure channel. Immediately, Jake moved to his private office and activated the encrypted communication system. President Wheeler appeared on the screen along with Dr. Nathan Cole and Elder Vexar. Jake, we have a situation. Council President the Zara has requested a private meeting. The president wants to negotiate. Jake raised an eyebrow. Negotiate what? They gave us an ultimatum 6 months ago and we ignored it. Dr. Cole leaned forward. That's just it, Captain. The ultimatum failed. Instead of isolating us, the Council's threats have pushed dozens of civilizations toward our alliance. They're losing control of the political situation. Elder Vexar spoke in his calm, wise voice. Captain Morrison, I have sensed great turmoil in the patterns around the Council leadership. President the Zira is facing challenges to authority that have not occurred for thousands of years. President Wheeler nodded. The meeting is set for tomorrow. On neutral ground, the trade station at Crossroads 7. I want you there as military representative. Jake, your rescue operations have become a symbol of what our alliance stands for. The next day, Jake found himself in a small conference room on Crossroads 7, one of the oldest trading posts in the galaxy. The station was neutral territory where different species could meet safely. President the Zara arrived exactly on time, the ancient being moved slowly but with dignity, accompanied by only 2 guards. Jake was surprised by how old and fragile the council president looked. President Wheeler, Captain Morrison. Thex's voice was quieter than Jake remembered from the council chamber. I come to speak honestly about the situation our civilizations face. President Wheeler gestured to a chair. We're listening. President the Zira, the ancient being, settled into the specially designed seat. I must begin with an admission that is difficult for one of my age to make. The Galactic Council has been wrong about the Kithani. Jake and President Wheeler exchanged glances. This was not what they had expected. We have known for many years that the Kithani possessed unusual abilities. What we did not understand was the nature of those abilities. We saw them as a threat to stability when they were actually trying to help maintain it. President Wheeler leaned forward. President the Zara, are you saying the Council knew the truth about the Kithani all along? Not the full truth, but more than we admitted. The major civilizations were afraid that Kithani predictions would expose problems we preferred to keep hidden. It seemed easier to exile them than to face the changes their warnings might require. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. President the Zira, thousands of people died because you ignored their warnings. Entire civilizations collapsed because you covered up problems instead of fixing them. The ancient being's form seemed to dim with sadness. You are correct, Captain, and now we face the consequences of our choices. The disasters we tried to hide have become too large to conceal. The Valkyrie economy has collapsed completely. The Shard Plague has spread to 47 worlds. The Zapirian Civil War threatens to tear apart their entire species. President Wheeler spoke carefully. What are you proposing? President the Zara, a new arrangement. The Galactic Council formally recognizes the alliance of free worlds as an equal partner in galactic governance. In exchange, we request access to Cathani predictive abilities to help address the crises facing our civilizations. Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. You exiled them for trying to help, and now you want their help. Captain Morrison, I understand your anger, but consider this. If we continue to oppose each other, millions of beings throughout the galaxy will suffer. If we work together, we can prevent much of that suffering. President Wheeler was quiet for several minutes, thinking. Finally he spoke. President Thexa, humanity will consider a partnership, but it comes with conditions. First, the Cathani must be formally cleared of all charges and recognized as a valued galactic species. Second, the alliance of free worlds maintains complete autonomy in our operations. And third, any civilization that wants to leave the old council structure to join our alliance must be free to do so. President the Zara's ancient form seemed to shimmer with what might have been relief. Those conditions are acceptable. 3 months later, Jake stood in the same conference room where the agreement had been signed, but now it was filled with representatives from over 60 different civilizations. The alliance of free worlds had grown beyond anyone's expectations. Elder Vexar stood at the center of the room, no longer a refugee, but an honored advisor to dozens of species. Beside him stood President Wheeler and President Zara, working together to coordinate relief efforts across the galaxy. The old Galactic Council existed, but it was now just one voice among many in a more democratic galactic government. The major civilizations had been forced to share power with smaller species they had previously ignored. Dr. Barnes and Telmara had established medical centers on 40 worlds, training doctors from multiple species in the enhanced diagnostic techniques they had developed together. Commander Phillips oversaw engineering projects that combined human technology with Cathani insights to solve problems that neither species could have tackled alone. Most importantly, children from dozens of species play together in schools throughout Alliance space, learning that cooperation was stronger than domination, and that helping others was more important than protecting yourself from imaginary threats. Jake watched a group of human and Cathani children working together on a science project, their different abilities complementing each other perfectly. One of the human children looked up at him with bright, curious eyes. Captain Morrison Telvar says her people can sense when storms are coming. Can humans learn to do that too? Jake smiled. I think humans can learn to do a lot of things when we have good teachers and open minds.